What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 50 of the Everyday Sens podcast. We made it to 55-0. It's a big milestone for us. I'm Jack Richardson, joined as always by Brendan Parks. We are recording here on Monday, October 23rd. Going to break down the Red Wings thumping the Ottawa Senators. Was it a thumping? We'll talk about that. Preview the Ottawa Senators hosting the Buffalo Sabres. A big week ahead in terms of a bunch of litmus tests, let's say. So, Brendan, how you doing today, and how's that loss sitting with you? It's been a couple days now. How's that feeling?
Yeah, that loss was bitter. That was an unfortunate kind of. It was 5-2 the final score. But I mean, Detroit fans will tell you the opposite. But Ottawa, by the numbers, outplayed Detroit. I thought they outplayed them on the ice. I mean, when we say outplayed, we more so mean like obviously they didn't score more goals in Detroit, but like they control play, right? Like they outshot. I think they almost doubled their shot total, or they had 31-21 or something like that. And they had like way more expected goals, and it was just really a special teams disaster for Ottawa. So. I do think that they control play, though. They looked really good at 5v5. They just didn't get the saves they needed, while Detroit kind of had prime Dominik Hasek in their net, and then and they got the lucky bounces kind of. But credit to them. I mean, they're 5-1 now, so we're going to talk a little bit about them because listen, we did our Atlantic Division predictions before the season, and Detroit was, I think, second last on both of our lists. Like everybody kind of wrote them off. And so far, it's looking like maybe Buffalo's the team who's going to be struggling a little bit more, while Detroit is kind of taking the next step very early, but like. Man, I mean, Alex DeBrincat, there's a lot of frustrating storylines with Detroit because obviously as a division rival, they are like someone we don't like, but at the same time, they're playing really well. So we do credit them, but I'm excited for that game on November 16th, I want to say, in Sweden when they rematch, because that's going to be interesting. I think the Sens' top line, like Brady was not as influential as he was last year. We didn't get the who wants it again this year, but hopefully he kind of gets a little more into it when they rematch. So yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on that loss, because for me, I mean, it's still bitter. Like, honestly, I just want to get to the next game. I will say the Sens have had 2 days off in a row after each of their games so far. So it's like the losses we've had to just sit on for multiple days, which is really awful. Like it's torture. So that'll be ending here when they play Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. But then they're off again until Thursday. So we'll see how this week goes. A lot to talk about though today. And yeah, let me hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we'll get into the DeBrincat and the Red Wings. We do have to talk about that because it's not even what he did on Saturday against Ottawa. It was what he did yesterday against Calgary. Hat trick, leading the league in goals and points. So we'll get into Alex DeBrincat, and just I want to pick your brain about all that because it's a great story and not really a great one for Sens fans right now. But I think for me, like, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I was proud of the way I interpreted that game after. I think I tweeted out like, and I am patting myself on the back. That was sarcasm for anyone who couldn't pick that up. But I tweeted out that the Sens played well, and you know they played well enough to win, I want to say, but they didn't deserve to win, if that makes sense. So the reason I think that is because they come out hot in the first period, like very, very hot. We're dominating it. To me, it felt like, okay, here we go again. They're going to roll over the Red Wings. They're an absolute wagon right now. Just at 5-on-5, all three lines coming over the boards. The fourth line's getting involved. It was really good. And I don't want to say that the refs, actually I will say it, the refs changed that game. And I don't think that's me being like, oh, the Sens only lost because the refs, handed it to the Red Wings. That's not what happened at all. The refs handed the Sens and the Red Wings a piece, multiple chintzy soft penalties, right? And the difference in the game was that the Red Wings capitalized on those chances. Now, I've seen a lot of Red Wings fans being like, oh, the Red Wings still outscored the Sens 2-1 at 5-on-5. So that I think it's tough to get in a discussion about that without looking at the first period. We have to look at the first period. That set the tone for the rest of the game, right? I'm not excusing the way Ottawa played in the second, because obviously that was brutal. But basically my point is, and I know you agree with me, but I'm just kind of like, I'm talking to air right now, but there are some Sens fans who legitimately like were giving me a bit of heat for saying that Ottawa got soft called too. Like they did though. And I don't know if you can argue that. I'll go through the first period right now. So they get those offsetting Ottawa gets a power play from Tkachuk getting jumped. And I think that was designed by the Red Wings. I think that's a moment where they're being like, look, we're not getting pushed around by this team again. That's a bit of a character call from the Red Wings. So good on them for doing that. I know Tkachuk got jumped, but it's more of a, we're not, the same thing is going to happen as last year, which is good. What they do when that happens, though, they get the energy going in the building, right? And whether it was intentional or not, it ended up working in their favor, because this is what happens. They get that power play. Ottawa does. Don't convert on that one. Minutes later, I think right after the penalty, a bit of a soft call. I don't remember what penalty it was, but it was one where if it happened against Ottawa, we'd be pretty livid. And then Sanderson scores. So when Sanderson scores on that power play, it forces the refs, and this is the game management. You and I were both talking about it during the game. That's so apparent. Because Sanderson scored on that power play, Detroit is now owed a call. And I used to roll my eyes at, I saw it a lot from Leafs fans in the playoffs and all of last year, especially when they were playing against Tampa, the game management from NHL referees. I'd roll my eyes because I never really noticed it for Ottawa. And I think it's been under a microscope a bit more lately than it has in years past. At least I think so. And now that the Sens are competing and they're a great team, and it was a great hockey game, it's blatantly obvious to me that the refs changed the course of that game. Now, last season, Ottawa's power play was dominant, right? So we'd have games where the Sens were getting outplayed, but they'd score 3 or 4 power play goals, and we wouldn't even think anything of it. Because obviously, yeah, that's still an indictment of how well your team is playing. You got to capitalize on your chances. So my point is that with that call on Greig, on the hit on DeBrincat, which was a huge hit, it was, if you're calling that, you got to call a lot of other stuff. There were a lot of those penalties, right? And I don't like talking about, oh, the refs blew the game, whatever, because they didn't. They still gave Ottawa chances, but Detroit's power play was just better. Ottawa's PK wasn't good, all of the above. So to me, that's what the biggest problem was. So the two things can be true. The refs changed the course of that game, but the Sens didn't adapt to the refs, game calling, and the Red Wings did, and that's why they won. And I think that's a fair way to break that down. I don't personally like, as a fan, we have a podcast, we talk about the team. I don't like breaking down why the PK sucks, because sometimes power plays are just that good and it's tough. But when it comes down to that, it's frustrating that was the difference in the game. It was so obvious that it changed the course. It was the emotion in the rink. Like, if they let that call go on Greig, then I think it's a whole nother ball game. So I want to get your thoughts on all of that, because that's kind of like, I've been holding that in for a couple of days. I think it got more articulate as I held it in, because it was frustrating on Saturday. But yeah, like the refs changed that game, but the Red Wings deserved to win. And I don't think those two statements are out there.
Yeah, so I have an everlasting hate against officials because I'm a New Orleans Saints fan in football, and they cost us a chance to go to the Super Bowl in 2018. That was a ridiculously good team. A literal, like, it was actually the call that cost them. So I now have like this bitterness against all officials, because that's how it is. So yeah, I didn't like their officiating. I will say they weren't good for either team in that game. Like, the game management went on throughout the entire 60 minutes was the problem for both sides. Like, it's almost like that call on Greig, they recognized, like, yeah, that was a bad call. Like, we shouldn't have called that, because the puck ended up in Ottawa's net. The big thing about that call was it should have been a momentum building moment for Ottawa. Like, the building went crazy when that hit happened. The bench went crazy. It was like this.
That first period was electric.
It was unbelievable when Greig threw that hit. And Ottawa had all the momentum to that point too. Like, Detroit went over 10 minutes without a shot, I'm pretty sure, in the first period. Yeah, it was 11 minutes in that Detroit got their first shot. It was 1-0 Ottawa. There was, I don't know how much time was left, under 5 minutes for sure in the period. Greig throws the body. Like, the entire game was favoring Ottawa. The ice was so heavily tilted. They were controlling the puck, and they did control the puck at 5v5 for a lot of the game, but they were really like peppering Detroit. Like, you could feel like the game was almost slipping from Detroit at the end of the first period. And then they call that penalty on Greig. And like, it's hard because, for one, Detroit scored 7 seconds into their power play, which, like, anytime that happens, it's deflating. But there was also like 3 or 4 minutes left in the period. So that was like one of those goals at the end of the period that then carries on, and it just completely changes the game. For two, like I said, it should have been a momentum building moment for Ottawa when Greig threw that hit. Instead, like, the Senators' narrative almost shifted. Like, if you've played hockey, you know how this feels. They had all the momentum. They felt like they were playing great, and then their mind kind of got distracted by the officials. Like, they were really focused. It seemed like on the game they were dominating Detroit, and then this call happens, and everybody is outraged at the refs. So now their focus is like thrown off. They're focused on blaming the refs. Like, Tim is a big one, obviously, where he's now in his head. He's calling out the refs on everything, and it's just like, that's fine. You can call them out, but they have to stay focused, and I don't think they've stayed focused. I think that from that point, you could see, like, Giroux too. It's like they're talking to the refs a lot. Brady's talking to the refs, and now all of a sudden they've gone from this dominant force where they've got the game in their hand to now being distracted, and their whole mind shifted to like, okay, the refs are trying to screw us. Like, we need to be angry about it. And it's hard to avoid that because it was a bad call and then the puck ended up in the net. But it's just like, I would have loved to see how this game ended up if that call didn't happen, because like Ottawa really had Detroit like where they wanted them. And if they would have scored another one, like Parker Kelly too had a chance to make it 2-0 early. If they would, like, if you would have put that in, I think they would have won the game because they had all of the momentum and that call just kind of threw them off. I'm not going to blame the refs. So Detroit still did capitalize. Like we said to Detroit, by the way, right now, their power play is 39%. Like, they're scoring at a ridiculous rate on the power play. They are like unstoppable on that unit. I don't think it's sustainable, but Ottawa really couldn't defend their set plays at all. It was crazy. Like, they are so good at getting the puck to the slot, just quick passes, and so credit to them for that. But again, should they have had that first power play that they got because of the Greig call? Absolutely not. And yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, did you have something to add to that too?
Kind of like you mentioned, it changed the way the Sens played because of what was being called, and I got two examples in my head. I think it was one in the second period and one in the third. Batherson, like it looked like in real time he got tripped, and then you go and watch the replay, he went down easy, and that's because they were calling stuff like that. So you gotta, like, they're trying to get the call, and I don't hate that because the Sens are good at that. They drew a lot of penalties last season, but when it doesn't work, it's like you just are getting caught red-handed essentially. Like you're trying to change the, or to bait a call because you know that that's what's being called. And then Giroux did the same thing in the third period, and I think it might have been Larkin, that Giroux goes down easy on, and then Larkin goes up and cross checks. I mean, that's when he gets the penalty. Like stuff like that is it's fine, but when
Tim
you're
did
a better
that too.
sorry,
Tim did that once too. He actually got like the odd man rush and he went down easy, and it was like, man, you could have just shot that puck.
I'm giving Tim Stutzlo one more game, and it's not that he's been playing terribly because he's still leading them in points, whatever it is. Saturday was the worst game I've seen him play in a long time, and I think he would know that as well. I want to give him a little bit more time before I press the panic button and say what's going on with 18, but he needs to be better than he was on Saturday. That's pretty obvious, but yeah, like I don't know if that's the style the Sens need to play with, and I hope they realize that. Like when you're, and I know this is gonna, maybe Red Wings fans will find this, because first of all, they are very vocal, and I don't hate it because we'd be the same way. It's a fun rivalry now, that's a fact. Like it's just a heated rivalry. It's the DeBrincat thing we talked about before the game is gonna just ignite everything. We'll talk about DeBrincat in a second, but the Sens are a better hockey team than the Red Wings, I think. And I think you mentioned the power play being red hot for the Red Wings. Their shooting percentage is almost at 50, for God's sake. That's not sustainable. So anyway, my point is, when the Sens are the better hockey team than the Red Wings, you're on home ice, you've got the energy. I don't want to see them falling into that game. Like, just keep going at 5-on-5 and roll with the punches. And I don't think they did that. So I'm really curious to see how they bounce back tomorrow. It is like, Ian Mendez wrote a piece. I haven't clicked on it yet, but he tweeted it out that it was just one game, but they've got Buffalo tomorrow night. They're in the New York, the Islanders on Thursday, and then the Penguins on Saturday. Three teams that were above them in the standings last year, when you think about it, right? They were all in and around that area. New York made it. Pittsburgh just missed, and Buffalo just missed by 1 point. These are, like I said, a litmus test. Like, I want to see how they bounce back against those teams. Tomorrow will be a big one against Buffalo. But my point is, when they're the better hockey team, like they are against Detroit, they can't be falling into that kind of game, because it feels like Detroit is like them last year, where their power play is just carrying them. Now, let's talk about number 93, I guess now, Alex DeBrincat. Like, is it hurting you? Like to me, I don't know how to describe it. It's more of a, like, you see a lot. It was more yesterday, to be honest, because DeBrincat didn't get any points against the Sens, which is pretty cool. Like, they held him pointless, whatever it was, booed him heavily every time he tossed the puck. But he got a hat trick and another assist on Sunday against Calgary. He's now leading the league in goals and points 6 games into the season. Personally, I'll ask what you think about it. It just hurts, because you can get made fun of as a Sens fan for him not wanting to be here. You get made fun of him for the trade that was made in the first place, for the return they got this summer, for not using him properly last year. There are so many different angles to take with DeBrincat producing like this that hurt. So I want to know what your feeling is seeing him light the lamp, and then I'll add some more stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, obviously. Like, DeBrincat, I tweeted this out last night. We always knew he was skilled. This is why we wanted to sign him. Like, you and I wanted to pay him despite the financial challenges it would present, because he's an ultra skilled player. Like, you don't just find guys like that left and right. Like, Dominic Kubalik cannot just replace Alex DeBrincat. That's not how it works. He is a premium scorer. He scored 40 goals 2 seasons in a row before coming to Ottawa. He's probably going to score 40 or 50 again this year. So it's like, he is a premium goal scorer. My frustration is that, and you know what? Before we even get into that, because I don't want to just like criticize him or get into negatives, I want to actually say, like, we don't have to like him as Sens fans. Like, we have every right to be angry at him, but at the same time, like, good for him. I mean, I still like him as a person. I'm happy he's going home and still, able to do that. And I think that's a big part of it too, is the fact that he's not distracted this year. Like, he's making a lot of money over the next 4 years, and he's got 4 years of security in Detroit, in his hometown. I'm sure he's feeling, as happy as he could possibly be on the inside. And regardless of what people think, that does make a difference. Like, if you're playing and you're very focused, like we talked about how the Sens got distracted by the penalties last game, got in their own head. Imagine being like that all year because you don't have a contract and you don't really like where you are. So it's like, now that he's home, I think that does play a definite factor. But regardless, what I tweeted about last night was that, and I don't want to blame the Sens too much, but I still don't love the way they used him last year. So he played 456 minutes with Batherson and Pinto as his line mates. And again, not bad line mates by any means. But this year he's got Larkin and Raymond as his line mates. That's a significant difference, right? And Ottawa never used him like anywhere else. That's the thing, is that he was struggling to finish. And that's what sucks for Ottawa, is that he did still, regardless of his line mates, regardless of him sometimes playing on the second power play unit and whatever it was, he still did get his looks. Like, he had a lot of chances that he just literally missed because, again, I don't think he was fully focused, and he admitted that himself. So like, I watched his goals in that hat trick performance for Detroit, and like, he came in and just sniped a couple, and it's like, he wasn't doing that for Ottawa. That's just straight up facts. He was missing the net by inches. He was hitting the post. Like, it just wasn't going in for him. But still, I would have liked to see Ottawa use him with Stützle and Giroux. I know that top line was so good last year, but when DeBrincat wasn't going, I would have really liked to see them mix it up. And there were times last year, like that November stretch too, where the whole lineup just really couldn't seem to make anything happen, and they just couldn't get the bounces. That's where I want to see them change things up and maybe get DeBrincat going, because DeBrincat, Stützle, and Giroux was the most anticipated line in franchise history before last season. Everyone was beyond excited for that. DJ even put them together in the preseason for 2 games. They played 7 minutes together all season last year. All season, like not even one game to see how it was going to go. So that was frustrating, and I don't love the way that they used him here. And who knows, right? If they would have used him a bit differently, maybe the puck goes in, maybe he feels more confident and he ends up staying. Regardless, I don't even know that, like, it would have been crazy hard to afford him now that we look at it and we see kind of how things have played out anyways. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy for him that he's doing well. It sucks that it's in Detroit. We knew this was a risk as well of trading him to Detroit. But again, this is why we don't really like him right now, is because he kind of forced their hand and kind of picked his own destination, right? So it made Dorion kind of have to trade him to a rival, which sucks because now Detroit is 5-1. DeBrincat is leading the league in several stats. He's got 8 goals. That took him 28 games with Ottawa last year, and they've played 6 games. So that just tells you everything you need to know about Detroit and DeBrincat. But again, I don't think Detroit's success is sustainable. I think that they're going to fall off. I can't see him or the team scoring at this rate all year. It's just not sustainable. They're scoring at well above the expected rate. And if they do, then congratulations, because you're getting all the bounces. But like, it's just not feasible in my mind that that's going to happen. Regardless, they are a bigger threat than we thought, and that is largely because we traded them Alex DeBrincat, who is now proving to be the guy who, of course, he wasn't the 1 year in Ottawa, but he was every other year of his career.
He is shooting 42% right now. So obviously that's not going to keep up. But you go in his career, like, he went 15 in his rookie season, 18, 8, he had that down year, then 20%, 15%, 10% in Ottawa. Now he's at 42. So you can expect him in the high teens, I'm guessing, this year. Like, and you're right, because of this hot start, 50 is absolutely possible. And it hurts because he's a great player. I loved watching him play. We were both on the boat of just keeping him, because I understand not wanting to give up anything or not wanting to lose him for nothing. But like, I think that's a bit of a, we talked about this all summer before the trade, but like that to me feels like a panic move in like a small market. We can't lose people for nothing, and like an old mentality to me. When they get a first, they get a Sabrango back, like a good prospect, and then the first, and that's all you get, because Tarasenko is the cap space they used, and Kubalik is who they got back in the trade. They're both free agents next summer, so they could also lose those guys for nothing. And then next summer, we're left with absolutely nothing from the DeBrincat trade other than a mid first round pick. So maybe that, I mean, that does have value, and I'm not, discrediting that, but like, I think um, the narratives that were coming out about DeBrincat, how didn't like playing behind Kachuk, didn't like it here, wanted to go home. I don't think that him. I don't believe that he didn't like playing behind Brady Kachuk. I really don't. He doesn't. You just have to look at the way he carried himself on Saturday, and obviously on the ice, he was getting into it with Brady, going after Ridley. Like that's the kind of player he is, though. That wasn't new. Like he did that last year. He got in like 3 fights last season or something. Like he has that feisty side to him. I get the sense though that he's not a guy who likes the spotlight, and people might roll their eyes at that because they're like, oh, you know, he got to pick where he went. He's a diva. He doesn't like playing in Ottawa. But we talked about it. Like if you got traded somewhere and then you had the opportunity, and I'm not saying that it's not because he forced his way to Detroit and said, I'll sign an extension there, so trade me there. Like he obviously did, but I would do the same thing if I wanted to go to a place. Like it's not crazy to exercise your right to do that. So yeah, like I'm not saying we need to not make him the villain. I was in favor of booing him at sports, but he's not this like bad guy. He's a very good hockey player. And that's why it's painful because it sucks that he didn't want to be here. I will push back on you a little bit on the they didn't use him properly, because that guy had all the chances in the world last year to score goals. He easily could have had 40 again. And I can count on, like, I can't count it, but I believe expected goals, he was what, or the negative, like goals scored below expected or whatever it is. Him and Brady Kachuk were top of the league, weren't they? Like he was up there for a while anyway. He absolutely was. And yeah, it's going to be a storyline we follow because he's going to be a great player there for the next 4 years when Ottawa's expected to compete, and they're going to be competing with them. So it stinks. I don't want to spend too much time on DeBrincat, but it's more what he did on Sunday that's like, damn, like this guy, it's not even the one that got away because it's not like he wanted to stay and they got rid of him, but um, it does hurt a little bit. Like they were never at full strength, and I feel like it also sucks because when you look back on it last season, you're like, wait a minute, the Sens had this guy who's got 12 points in 6 games on their second line. How are they not a better team? And arguably it was because of him. He wasn't playing this well. Like he wasn't scoring goals. So there's a lot of moving parts. I don't hate DeBrincat. I think he carried himself very well in the media afterwards, before the game, whatever it was, and just played hockey. Like I don't hate any of that. And yeah, like it really, like I'm almost, I don't even have words to describe the way it feels, because it's a kick in the gut. It really is. Like it just, what can we do? Like you can blame DJ, and I, like, not that I agree with that, like I said, but it just stinks. I think Dorion, I don't know, man. I mean, let's just pivot this a little bit. Like how many times is he going to be allowed to make a mistake, let's say, right? And I know that I don't agree that they shouldn't have made that trade in the first place with Chicago. And I think you're in the same boat, but at the same time, it doesn't look great right now. And it's his move. And like, how often do GMs get to sit there and go through mistake after mistake and still have a job, right? Like that's what's kind of like this. A lot of teams would fire someone for this DeBrincat situation. They would.
I do have a hard time with the Dorian thing with DeBrincat, though, just because I do agree that he should have made the trade in the first place. I know it's easy in hindsight to look back and say, like, oh, you should have never done that without an extension in place. And maybe he shouldn't have, like, maybe because there wasn't an extension, he shouldn't have. But if you remember, like, I think people are forgetting how much pressure there was on Ottawa to acquire a top 6 forward when he did trade for DeBrincat. Like, he had been in the market for a long time and was trying to find the right player. And I'm sorry, but when a guy like Alex DeBrincat, who scored 40 goals twice in a row in Chicago, and like you're seeing it, he wasn't like a bad player who was just go with Kane. No, he's showing it again in Detroit. He is a legitimately elite player. Like when that player becomes available to trade, and frankly, Ottawa didn't even give up that much compared to what they probably should have had to give up at that time. Like you pull the trigger. That's just how it is. Like I'm sorry, but I would do that too. I would pull the trigger on a guy like that, and you hope that he's gonna sign. DeBrincat, frankly, the whole situation with Ottawa, it just honestly kind of just didn't work out for them. Like, it sucks, and Pierre Dorion definitely took a risk, and I do agree with the sense that maybe he should be, in trouble or maybe fired because of the fact that the risk didn't pay off. That's what risks are, right? If it doesn't pay off, then you're gonna face the consequences, and it definitely was a risk. But I'm not gonna blame PD for making the original trade. I will say, like, whatever happened, we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but if there was no extension to be had with DeBrincat and like he literally forced his way out, if he told them like he's not gonna extend, then I mean that's a hard situation. I know that obviously they kind of had to just trade with Detroit at the end of the day and make the best of it. I still wish they would have signed him if possible, because by the way, they are spending $7.5 million on Kubalik and Tarasenko, which is what DeBrincat got basically. So it's basically the same money. But again, it really depends on his kind of what he was telling the team and if he would actually sign. It's a tough situation. It really is. I have a hard time even blaming anybody just because it was so like unique in the sense that he almost like just literally didn't want to stay with the Sens. And it just seemed like he was so distracted last year. Like that's the only logical solution I can come up with to how he's doing so well again immediately with Detroit is that he's not distracted and he's super focused. And he's also playing with like better players. But like, again, he got his looks last year. You said it. Like, that's why it's hard for me to blame Pinto and Batherson and playing with them, is that he still got a lot of looks. Like, he still had way more expected goals than actual goals last year, and he just didn't put the puck in the net. He just missed his chances, and this year he's not. So my only answer is that he is focused, he's happy, and he's content with where he's at. And last year his mind was just other places, and he did admit too that he was being lazy. So I mean that's the bad part about it.
But that's the thing. Like we ran with that quote, and obviously we did because it's all we had at the time. But you think about it, like you said, we both played hockey. There's a difference between getting like unfocused, like you said. That's kind of what he clarified. He's like, I wasn't focusing on my chances, whatever. And that's for him as well. That's hindsight. In the moment, he's not getting a one-timer in the slot being like, I'm going to miss this because I don't like playing in Ottawa. That's not how hockey players are wired. He's not that kind of person. And I think that running with the narrative like, oh, he didn't try here, I think that's BS. He obviously tried here. He was playing well. Like, he was a good player. He just didn't score. I'll admit, I'll eat my words. Through 6 games at least, Detroit's power play is the best in the NHL by a mile. In Ottawa, he was a big part of why they were a great power play. Sens power play struggling a little bit to start the season. Like, it's the two things correlate a little bit, right? Like, he's a great hockey player. I don't buy that he wasn't trying here. I think that's BS. If it was a guy like, who played a physical game, got involved, like engaged physically, like if he was playing like Brady Tkachuk and then made those comments, I'd be like, okay, this guy was not actually 100% committed. When you're a goal scorer, you don't not just try on chances. And if you do, that's absolutely sadistic, because like you think about all the things that go into getting a grade A scoring chance in the NHL. If you have the luxury of not trying on your chances and being like, you know what, I'm not going to score 40 goals this year because I don't like playing in Ottawa. Like, you see how ridiculous that kind of sounds when you actually like spell it out like that? Like, and hey, maybe it is a thing, and maybe he's actually just playing this card of that wasn't true, whatever. And then if so, that's a different story. But I have a hard time buying that now. Anyway, I have a hard time buying that he was lazy on his chances, because you watch him, look at his highlights from last night in the game, like against Calgary. It's not much different than what we saw. The puck is just going in. I'm not even being crazy. Like, I don't think that's crazy to say. And it's the goals that's the difference right now. He had 4 assists through 4 games. He was a point per game player early on last year. He just couldn't score. And when the Sens started losing, it got amplified because no one else could score. Like, it's actually just kind of mind boggling. I don't hate making him the villain because it's sports. Again, I don't mind it. But when we're talking right now, I bet you we're going to have comments on the YouTube page on this episode being like, he didn't, Sens are better off. They don't need him, whatever. I have a hard time believing that, man, because you put DeBrincat in there at 7.5 on 1-year deal. You deal with the punches later. And like I'm saying, 7.5 arbitration, whatever it is, take out Kubalik and Tarasenko. Pinto's there. Like, I'm guessing Pinto's there. You got Greig. Like, you still have a solid top 9. I don't know, man. Like, to me, it's just, I'm not saying they should have kept him because this is a mistake. The puck's just going in for him, but it's just a sign of what he is capable of. I don't think he's playing different hockey than he was in Ottawa. I think that's kind of my point.
Yeah, and people do forget he was a good player regardless. Like, he did struggle a bit defensively last year too, and I don't know that the system that Ottawa runs really fit him that well, but he was still like one thing I noticed when they played Detroit is that he's such a good possession player. That's why I really liked him personally, is because the Sens don't value possession a whole lot, and that might be the system too, obviously. But like DeBrincat, when you watch him, he gets the puck and he'll enter the zone with possession. He'll curl back, he'll make a perfect feed to the other side, and they'll have a great opportunity. Like he is really smart with the puck. He knows where to go. And the Sens are missing that a little bit, I think, and especially on the power play, like you said, is he's such a lethal shooting threat, but he's a great passer too, and he has a very smart mind with the puck. So I do miss that. The Sens miss it. We can move off of him, though. I'm sure people are going to get annoyed that we've talked about him so much, but regardless, it's an important thing because he was a big deal. Like we should like kind of amplify the fact that Ottawa fans did a great job booing him. That might be part of the reason why he was held pointless in that game where Detroit scored 5 goals, is because Ottawa, like right till the end when they were down by 3 or 4 goals, they were still booing him when he touched the puck. So great job by the fans who were there. And just another little, I'm going to take a little shot at Detroit here because they have been in my replies for days. Every time we tweet anything about them, they're still in the replies. Like some of them have followed me so they can put my notifications on so that they can come into my replies right when I tweet. Like it's insane. It's like egotistic. It's crazy. But anyways, here's my little shot at Detroit. I talked about how I don't think their power play is sustainable and their goal scoring is like, there's no way they finish that high all season. Well, they've also beat Tampa Bay, who's been bad to start the year. They've beat Columbus, who's awful. They beat Pittsburgh, who's been bad. Ottawa, who's been good, but whatever. And Calgary, who's been bad. So I'm just saying their schedule hasn't been an crazy difficult schedule. They've had some fairly reasonable matchups, but that kind of works against me because they obviously beat Ottawa too. So regardless, I think that they've won 5 games now, and I think 4 of those games were fairly lightweight opponents, we'll say. So I'm interested to see kind of how this carries on throughout the year. Credit to them so far, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Ottawa also started 4-2 or 4-1 last year, and then they ended up where they were. So we'll see what happens. There's always a few teams like this. I think Arizona's lighting it up in the West too. So yeah, we can move off this whole Detroit thing though. Put them in the rear view until November 16th when we're going to jump right back into this discussion because I cannot wait. That is like my circled game right now on the calendar. I'll tell you, my blood has not been boiling like it did in that game against Detroit for a long time. Like I haven't felt that frustrated in a long time, just because like the things weren't going right for Ottawa. But then, you know, you had 4 guys jump Kachuk, you had DeBrincat smiling in Kachuk's face, which is just like that stupid little smile that you hate, and then it just like all this different stuff, and then the Greig penalty. Very frustrating game, but we'll move off that, maybe talk a bit about Buffalo, and we've got some other things too. You've had some great questions on Twitter that have sparked a lot of debate too, so we can get into the next segment here.
Yeah, and just again, before I move on, the only reason I wanted to talk about DeBrincat so much is because he lit up the lamp on Sunday. If he didn't, and it was just kind of like 1 or 2 points, I don't think we would have spent so much time on it. But he's leading the NHL right now in goals and points, which is not nothing. So we had to talk about it.
Has 0 points.
Yeah, that doesn't help either. I haven't hated Kubalik's game. Again, I want to give him a bit more time. Whatever. All right, let's talk about the one positive I think from the game against Detroit. Maybe we're not even planning on talking about Jonas Korpisalo. Weird game. Okay, if it happens again, red flag. His numbers don't look great. He's been in some strange hockey games, the 2 he's played, and if that snowballs, that's a problem. But we'll get onto that just to not bury the lead because I think that was a big talking point as well. He also made some
great saves too. He made
did
some really big saves.
I love when the analytics person from The Athletic is clearly watching the game and just posts a picture of his save percentage and the saves and says, "Oh, good signing by Ottawa." I love that when national NHL coverage people just don't watch the game and put that. It's great. It's very, very fun. Gives it a lot of positive press for Ottawa. But the one positive from that game was Ridly Greig. I've been on the Ridly Greig train. Everyone's on the Ridly Greig train. No one hates him, but this kid is special. He's a great hockey player. Obviously, the hit on DeBrincat, that should have been a momentum builder, was not a penalty. And I don't hate that he did it. And I like the way he handled himself in the media afterwards. Scored his first of the season, obviously in the 3rd period, but he was all around it all game. Easily the Sens' best player of the night. What have you seen from Ridly Greig that just makes you confident in this kid? Because I know that Shane Pinto is not here. We'll touch on that again because you mentioned the question of the day that I had yesterday. And to me, I think you can't ask for a better replacement in quotations there for Shane Pinto in the meantime.
Yeah, Greig has really filled the role. Like he's filled the role to the point where like people are questioning trading Shane Pinto because Ridly Greig's been so amazing. And I honestly I thought Greig would be a full-time NHLer this year, but I didn't think he'd be this impactful, especially early. I thought he'd be kind of like a third line left wing and maybe scores like 30 points. And he's kind of just like a rookie season. You kind of say he was good. He wasn't great, but he was good enough, right, to be in the lineup. Like he's in the 7 games or whatever games, 5 games in here, but he's like been in the Calder discussions already. And you can kind of see his name up there in the sense that like he's really producing. He's playing the center role really well. And that's the big thing, is that he's playing a difficult role above where he was expected to because Pinto's not here. Now, again, with Norris coming back, obviously he's more so in a third line, middle six type of role, and they're splitting. But he has really found like lightning in a bottle here with Matthew Joseph and Vladimir Tarasenko. This trio is unbelievable. Greig, to me, this year looks a lot stronger on his stick. I've noticed. I've posted a few clips about it. I might even have to do a film study on him if he keeps this up, because he's a treat to watch. Like he is, I tweeted out during the game, he is the most fun player on Ottawa's roster. That's really crazy to say with like Sanderson, Stützle, and but by fun I don't mean like with not even like skills with the puck, but just the fact that he's so tenacious too. Like he's almost a mix of somewhere in the middle of like Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk. Almost like he's not quite at the same skill level, but he's got that same flair to him where when he gets the puck, you like people are starting to get like, I'm getting that feeling now when Ridly Greig gets the puck that something good is going to happen that you have with certain players, right? Some guys, they get the puck and you're like, yeah, this is going into the corner. They're going to turn it over. They're going to throw a hit. The puck's going to go the other way. Greig is like, hey, he's going to actually make something happen here. And he did. You saw he scored against Detroit, obviously a nice breakaway goal late in the game. But like he's got 4 points now as well in 5 games. He's got 7 hits. He's leading the Sens analytically too. Like he's got the best expected goals for percentage. That's up at 67.07. Like the next is Joseph and then Tarasenko. Like that whole line is leading Ottawa. They've just been so dominant. And it's all about possession. Like that line is so smart with how they move around the ozone. Like just watch them skate around. They find open space. They pass to each other. They go, and then they get a good shot at the end. That's why their analytics are so good, is because they always end up getting a good shot out of it too. It's very impressive, and Greig is really at the forefront of it. Like he's been so good with the puck, but away from the puck, he's been throwing hits. He's been physical. He's been strong on his stick. Good defensively too. I don't have it pulled up, but I don't think that line has been on for a goal against. They haven't. Greig has been on the ice for 6 goals for at 5v5, 0 against at 5v5. Wow. That's insane. Vladimir Tarasenko on the ice for 4 goals for at 5v5, 0 against. Joseph's been on for 6 goals and 3 against, so that must have come with a different line. But Greig, like 6 goals for and none against. That tells you everything you need to know about how he's been. Like he is just and he was like this last year in his 20 games too, by the way. He has been a really positive impact player, which is why I would like to see him play more games last year. But this year, like there's no way he's going anywhere. He's been arguably, I'm not going to say their best player because that's been Jake Sanderson, but he's been right damn near Sanderson for like their most positive impact player. And I've been really impressed by him. So give me some of your thoughts on Greig, because you were the one who was really hyping him up during the rookie tournament. I actually thought like he did well in the rookie tournament, but he was a little under the radar compared to what I was expecting, and kind of in the preseason too. He's taken the regular season by horns here.
He played 1 game in the rookie tournament, and it was almost like a formality, right? Like
yeah.
Here you go, just play the 1 game. I love watching him play. He's just like and he's going to become a fan favorite really quickly if he isn't already. Like the DeBrincat hit, especially, that's just such an easy way for people to be like, oh yeah, this kid's legit. Another great thing though is in the Washington game when he got in Wilson's face twice. Like he was going after Tom Wilson in the scrums and stuff like that, and just not backing down. Like that's who he is, and we knew that when they drafted him. That's the kind of player he was. We've watched him at the World Juniors. He was the MVP of one of the best Canadian teams that has been iced in a while. I think it was actually the team that Jake Sanderson shut down in the finals. Not a big deal, but he was the MVP and he got hurt, but he was their best player up until that point. And you're right, like he's clearly put on some weight. I think Dorian mentioned he worked out a lot this summer. He came into camp in the best shape of his life, like all players do, but he legit, you can tell he put on some weight, and it's making him stronger on his feet. I think last year, even though he played well in the 20 games he played, he was a little bit, easy to knock off the puck, like not driving play like he is now. And man, like a lot of focus was on Tarasenko's start, Joseph's start, how good they both looked. Oh, you can't move Joseph. Tarasenko was a great signing. You can't blame Dorian for that, but you look at Ridly Greig, man, that's the common denominator for both of those guys. And I know it's a line, they're all working together, but Ridly Greig's been special. And I posted a question yesterday, and people didn't really answer it because they said both. But it was long term, who is the better fit for the Ottawa Senators? And I asked, is it Ridly Greig or is it Shane Pinto? Now, we'll contextualize that a little bit. Obviously, I want to keep them both, and I'd love to keep them both. But you've got Greig at center right now, and I'm not saying he'd be less effective on the wing, and especially when Giroux moves on, like long term, they both should be on this hockey team. But in the meantime, when you've got Stützle and Norris signed for the next 8 years together, who do you put at third line center? Is it Pinto or is it Greig? And I know they'll probably play together anyway when Pinto eventually gets here, but I think it's a great question. If you had to pick one, and I'm asking you right now, long term, who would you rather have, Ridly Greig or Shane Pinto?
I don't like that question. I said both as well. I mean, the right answer is both. If you had to pick one, it's really tough because Greig is obviously off to a hot start, but Pinto has shown he can be that 20 goal scorer. I do like. I'm gonna choose Ridley Greig, and that's just because I like his flexibility more. I don't know how. I've never seen Pinto play the wing. I've never seen him be able to move around a little bit. Greig has, and Greig absolutely can play the wing. Like I said, though, Greig has what I think separates him from Pinto, and I think that Pinto brings other attributes that are better than Greig. Like, they have their own, they're not the exact same player, they have their own skill sets. What I really like about Greig, though, like I said before, is the tenacious play. That's something that I adore in a hockey player, and it's the Brady Tkachuk style, right? It's the ability to get in other people's heads, and this is another thing we didn't see from Greig last year much. Like, in junior, if you ever watched Ridley Greig, he was an agitator. Like, he was a Brad Marchand light. Like, he was the type of guy, he got a bunch of suspensions, obviously, but he's the type of guy who's like, the other team is really hating him. So in the very first game of this season, I tweeted out, like, other teams are going to learn to hate this guy's name because you've seen it. I mean, he got in Tom Wilson's head. I'd have to go back now. I can't remember. He really agitated, like, he's agitated some big names so far, at least like 3 big name players, where he's really just like done little things, right? He did that to Kucherov too, actually, at the end of the period against the Lightning. Give him a little cross check, gave him a little bump, just a little bit late. Like, not a penalty, it's a clean play by the rules, but it's just not something you really do as a hockey player. It's like by the hockey code, kind of. It's like the period's ending, you don't throw a hit or you don't give him a shot or anything. Ridley Greig does give him a shot, regardless of what the hockey player handbook says. So that obviously pisses people off, and then they get in their head. And you saw Tom Wilson, like, ended up going after him at the end of the game. He really threw him. Like, he was living in his head that whole game. So that attribute is something that, like, you literally can't quantify it with analytics or anything, but it's there and it's impactful. And Ridley Greig, like, he's the type of guy who's going to lick somebody's face like Brad Marchand did. And it's just hard to find guys like that. There's not a lot of players who will play with that edge where they're willing to walk the line about, like, too much and just not enough. And he does just that. He walks the line. By the way, penalties were a big issue for him last year, and they have been in junior too. He's only got that one penalty this year so far, and that was the non-penalty against DeBrincat that shouldn't have been called. So he's actually been playing quite disciplined, regardless of the whole thing that's going on. So I'm quite content though with his play, and I'm gonna go with him over Pinto. But again, Pinto, like, if he was playing and he scored 5 points in 5 games, I think we might be saying the opposite. Right? He was off to a hot start last year. Pinto's probably the guy who's going to score more goals than Greig. We'll give him the edge on that one. And I don't want to say he's a better two-way player, but he's a nice, really good two-way player too. Very good at faceoffs. Greig's kind of struggled in the dot so far. So, like I said, they have their own attributes, and I think the right answer is both. Because again, like, Josh Norris, who knows where his health is at? Like, of course, he's been healthy so far through 2 games, but like, if he gets hurt again, suddenly your lineup, you've got Rourke Chartier at third line center again if Pinto's not there. Right, so if you're trading Pinto, like, I'm sorry, but that's a fireable offense in my mind. That's worse than the whole DeBrincat debacle would be trading Shane Pinto. It makes no sense to do that. You trade 4 other guys before you trade Pinto. So if that, and we're talking about trading Pinto, if you haven't heard, because during the intermission, I didn't hear it, but I read the quote. Bruce Garriock said something about how he thinks the Pinto situation is going to be resolved in the next few days, but he's not convinced it's going to be a contract that comes, which kind of insinuates that, like, they might be considering a trade. Right. I don't know if anybody else has talked about that, but the fact that that's even being thrown out there is, like, beyond crazy to me. Pinto's a 22-year-old who just scored 20 goals as a rookie and was an excellent two-way center. If you trade him, and center is so valuable because, again, it's one of the probably the most important position in hockey, and you need depth. Like, every contending team has a good 1, 2, 3 punch, or most of them anyway. And I'm willing to bet that the winners over the last few years have had that 1, 2, 3 punch as well. Like, if Josh Norris gets hurt, you've got Chartier on your third line, Greig on your second line. And again, Greig's been great. Is he sustainable as a real second line center? I don't know. We don't know yet. But Chartier on the third line, like, it's just, you're one injury away from being, like, totally in a complete mess if you don't have Pinto. So I think that having the flexibility with Pinto there, and again, it's not like Pinto's going to cost you that much money. I think having that at least for the next couple of years is going to be really important for the Sens because of their injury history. So for me, the answer, like if I had to pick one, would be Ridly Greig, but I like you have to keep both. You have to keep both. I am going to lose my mind if they trade Shane Pinto. I will put that out there right now. So I honestly think all Sens fans should. There's really no reason to trade Shane Pinto.
Yeah, if you were going to trade Shane Pinto, why didn't you dangle him for DeBrincat? Or like, it just the list goes on for how ridiculous it would be. I'm not ready to jump the gun and say that they are going to yet because Bruce said that on Saturday. It's been a few days, haven't really heard anything, so we'll see. I've got Ridley Greig's hockey DB pulled up just to kind of give some stats, I guess, right? Obviously, that's why you pull up a hockey DB. But in his first full season in Brandon Wheat Kings, he was there for the WHL. That was in 2019. He had 35 points, 65 games as a rookie, which is pretty underwhelming, to be honest. And you end up being a first round NHL draft pick. Like usually those guys come and light the lamp right away. The following year, though, he has 60 points, 56 games, gets taken 28th overall by the Senators that following October. That season was a bit weird for them with COVID. Greig played 7 games in the AHL, then played 21 in Brandon, and he had 32 points in 21 games. And then the following year, had 63 points in 39 games. So he just ramped up the offensive production, obviously, which is pretty typical. But what's interesting to me, though, is when he got to Belleville officially last season, he was a rookie in both Belleville and Ottawa. And he's still a rookie, by the way, still qualifies for the Calder Trophy. So we'll push that narrative for sure. He had 9 points in 20 games last year for the Sens, 2 goals, 7 assists. Played with Giroux a lot, a couple nice plays with him on the power play. And then last season in Belleville had 29 points in 39 games, 15 goals. Like he had pretty great numbers, to be honest. Like those aren't nothing. And the production's coming now, obviously. I'll make a case for Shane Pinto because again, I want to keep both, and they should, and they probably will, from what I think. But you know, like Pinto is less versatile, if that makes sense, right? So if you had to pick, and you're deep on the wings right now, anyway. Tarasenko, Giroux are going to move on eventually, but right now they're deep on the wings. So if you had to pick one right now, I'd pick Pinto because of all the depth on the wings. But again, like it's so hard to you can't pick, and I know that's why I asked the question for people being like, "Why'd you ask it if there's no answer?" Because it's a tough one. There's no wrong answer if you pick one of the players. That's the thing. It's forcing yourself to make a choice. That's what's the problem. And if the Sens do that, that's a problem too. Like I think as soon as Josh Norris signed, I think Pinto was still a rookie. Yeah, because he was injured the whole year before. But when Norris signed and they had Stützle and Norris locked up that summer, immediately in my brain, I'm like, okay, long term, who's here, Greig or Pinto? Like they're both centermen. Not one of them's not playing on the fourth line. Like, what are you going to do with those guys? So yeah, we'll see. Maybe that'll be a nice battle to follow. But again, keeping both is preferred. I think I want to keep that line together, especially like even when Pinto comes back. I don't know where you throw him because you can't touch Joseph, Tarasenko, Greig right
Well, it
now.
depends who gets traded.
Yeah.
Like if Joseph's gone, then you're in a different situation. Maybe you go Pinto center, Greig and Tarasenko on the wing.
Yeah. I mean, I know Greig will probably move to the wing eventually, but yeah, it's just it's not a fun scenario that they've dug themselves into, which is really unfortunate. Although if they keep losing and they lose to Buffalo and then they lose again, sky will be falling. We'll be calling for heads anyway. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. No Artem Zub tomorrow. Let's get into that a little bit. Obviously, missing him on the blue line. No shutdown pairing with Jake Sanderson. Didn't really have to get exposed at 5-on-5 with it though because of all the penalties on Saturday. So they're not playing him tomorrow. Shabbat's playing. He was another maintenance day, but he will be playing. So hopefully we get a better look at what it looks like without Artem Zub. But JBD didn't play a ton on Saturday. But like, what do you? I know you had some thoughts just on Zub and what he brings to the lineup, and just you want to talk about that a little bit and how they're going to miss him.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was by far their best defensive defenseman. I think people were really underrating him. I know a lot of people thought he had a down year and he didn't do very well, but he played in so many defensive situations. He played like he was really faced with very little offensive potential, like just because of the faceoffs and the way that his shift started and yada yada yada. So I think that he's been really good for them this year. He's been a big part of their penalty kill this year too. So missing him there is obviously impactful and part of the reason that they struggled so much. But he's just like him and Sanderson have been really good. And like I said, I'm doing a film study on Jake Sanderson right now. So I went through his first 5 games and I got 70 clips of Jake Sanderson, but obviously he's with Zub too. So I saw a lot of Artem Zub, and that pairing is so good defensively, like so good at shutting down the rush, so good at defending the net front and boxing players out. And like missing Zub, you just don't get that same thing. You kind of like Bernard Docker and Hamonic. I thought Hamonic really struggled in heavier minutes last game. Not that he played that much, like he played 15 minutes, I think, but he still didn't look very good. He just doesn't have the speed. He's getting exposed. Players just walking around him. So that's unfortunate that Hamonic is kind of back with Sanderson, and now Sanderson's got to deal with that again. For me, I would just keep continuity. So my pairings would be Chychrun and Chabot, and then Sanderson, Bernard Docker, and then Brandstrom Hamonic, and that's just literally keep continuity. Like they threw everything in a blender last game with the defense. Zub was out and they mixed everything up. They tried to do that whole like strong left side thing again, and I don't know. I didn't really like their defense last game. I know they had a lot of penalties, but I was not a huge fan of how it looked. So I'd rather them just keep kind of the same thing. Use Bernard Docker as a temporary filler. I trust Sanderson to be able to carry the load with a guy like that. Like I think Bernard Docker, if he plays with Sanderson, just keep it balanced. But I think Sanderson can kind of hold his own regardless of who his partner is. So whether it's JBD or Hamonic, it's up to Sanderson to kind of carry the load there. So it sucks. Like Zub, I think, is way more impactful than anybody realizes, and we kind of saw that last game. I thought he'd only missed 1 game. I'm not even sure what his injury is. He got hit in the ear with a puck, so I don't know if he's just like got stitches on his ear or what is going on. But
I think it's a bit of a head thing too. It sounds like it's. I mean, you get hit in the ear. I mean, I know he broke his jaw last year from the same play. I think we talked about that, and I'm sure that is not helping. You break a jaw, it's probably not the same for the rest of your life. But not ideal.
What pairings would you go with? Would you?
I think I like what you were saying. I don't think they're going to do that though. I think they had their pairings in practice. Look, I don't hate. I don't know. It's so tough because JBD, like I'm a big JBD guy. I always have been. But when they had that top 6 and then you take out Zub and you put JBD there, you just realize like he's not as big, and I think he plays the same game as Zub, but Zub is much bigger and stronger. So it is more effective, and it's tough for JBD, but man, I don't know. I just let Jake Sanderson fly. Like that's what I would do. Again, we didn't even touch on him. 3 goals, 5 games. Can't ask for much more from the future Norris candidate. The TSN, I want to touch on this. It just happened. Put out their power rankings, and guess who's first among Canadian teams? The Ottawa Senators. Guess who was also first among Canadian teams last season at the same time? The Ottawa Senators. So we'll see where that goes. Actually, an interesting one I wanted to bring up. Another power ranking. It's the second Monday of the season. Big one for to get a sense of where the league is at. The Score posted a power ranking, and they've got like hot takes or and it pertains to the defense. That's why I'm bringing it up. Oh, I want to see what they titled it. Early overreactions for each team. I don't know if anyone uses the Score, but that's kind of like what I use for scores, I guess. Anyway, they've got Toronto at 9 and then Ottawa at 11 in the power rankings. They were at 17 going into the year. The strong start is still there, despite the loss. Just got to see how things play out. Big week for Ottawa. We'll tee that up in a little bit here. We're going long today, folks. Hope you enjoy. Leave a like, comment on the YouTube page, subscribe as well. But we've got a lot to get into, and that's why we're here. Episode 50. It's a special one. This is the hot take. All right. Thomas Chabot is the Senators' 3rd best defenseman. Jake Sanderson and Jacob Chychrun are off to the races with 6 and 5 points respectively, while Chabot lags behind with just 1 assist. I believe he's got 2. They added another one for him, but point stands. Sanderson and Chychrun have superior marks in shot attempts 4, goals 4 percentage, and expected goals share 2. The duo will usurp Chabot on the depth chart before long. There's a lot of people already saying this is already happening. I feel like that's an important context to kind of throw out there when we're talking about the D pairings. I thought Chychrun wasn't great on Saturday. Actually, since the home opener, he's been a little bit quiet just in general. But that's the beauty of having those 3 studs back there, is like any given game, one of them can be the best guy on the ice. I thought Chabot actually was better against Washington. I think we talked about it, but he looked great against Washington, got his 2 points there, obviously. But yeah, I thought I'd throw that out there because the Sens are still getting recognition. Despite the loss, Detroit was like 5th on the power rankings for the Score. They're hot, obviously, and it's easy to get wrapped up in all of that and be like, oh, woe is me. But the Sens have had a great start. They're in a good spot. I think we should make that clear. It's just about how they respond. This is a huge week, but I'm not pressing the panic button yet.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, they've got Buffalo, New York, the Islanders, and Pittsburgh coming up in the next 3 games, and then they're off till the Thursday. Like they play Pittsburgh Saturday, and then they're off till Thursday after that. So these are 3 big games. Yeah, I know it's like almost a full week off. I don't know why the schedule is the way that it is, but that sucks. Regardless, so these are 3 big games, right? Because like we talked about it last episode, and I really spoke about it a lot. How I think they need to build a cushion so that they can afford losses later. Like what they've been doing and what they did last year was they got off to a start, which made them need to go on a big winning streak later in the year. Like, if you get off to a mediocre to bad start, you have to pretty much hope that you go on a big winning streak at some point to make up those losses and get the wins back. That's just asking for failure. Like, that's asking to not succeed. So I think the key is building a nice cushion on your win-loss record early, right? Like, if you get up and you get to 6-2 or whatever it might be, 6-3. You can afford a loss or 2 here and there, right? You can afford that loss to Chicago last year. That's what I think needs to be kind of put through these guys' mind is that, yes, it's easy to look at the schedule and say, oh, we've still got, 78 games left or 77 games left. And so 1 loss here and there doesn't matter. And sure, okay, but like 1 loss here means you're going to have to win another game later. So I'd rather them just get off to a hot start and kind of build that cushion so that they can afford to lose the games that maybe they shouldn't lose later in the year, because those games are going to happen. But it's just about building the start so that you're able to afford those losses, which, yeah, I talked about it last episode, but I just want to hit that again because you see their schedule and like, again, it's an easy schedule at the beginning, but you know what that means? It's going to be hard later. So like you have to win the games you're supposed to win early in the year because they're going to face kind of a lot of challenges as the season goes on and progresses. But yeah, they've got Buffalo, the Islanders, and then Pittsburgh. 3 winnable games. I know they were all above them in the standings last year. Pittsburgh has been really bad to start this year. They have not looked good. I don't know how New York's doing. I think they were off to a bit of a hot start, but I still think that's a winnable game. And then Buffalo obviously has really struggled so far too, despite people kind of being high on them. Devin Levi has been really questionable. So tomorrow the key is finish your goddamn chances. I do not want this to become a narrative where the Sens are struggling to finish again this year.
Yeah, and Buffalo plays tonight, so it's a back-to-back with travel for them. It'll be a nice Craig Anderson retirement ceremony before, not a jersey retirement yet. We'll talk about that actually maybe next episode. But yeah, they need to pounce, and I think 5 of 6 is reasonable. I like doing these like, oh, how many points should they get in the next 3 games? Because everyone's like, the common answer is always 1 fewer than the total. It's always like 5 of 6, right? But then I don't want to lose in overtime. I said that before. Like I want 6 of 6. I think that's reasonable to expect. I'm actually, I know that we don't really talk about, odds and everything like that. And because gambling is gambling, but what I'm doing is I'm keeping track of the Sens opening line in every game this season and just how they do. So I'll run through it. We've been 5 games here, right? So for those unaware of how the odds work, if you're plus 160, it means you're not the favorite. If you're minus whatever, you're the favorite. That's the easy way to explain it. So game 1 at Carolina, they were plus 160. They lost. Home opener against Philadelphia, minus 185. They won. Tampa, minus 140. They won. Washington, minus 180. They won. Detroit, minus 155. They lost. I think I hope I keep up with it and I don't forget, but like, I think that'll be fun to look at the end of the year. Just how many times were the odds makers on the right side of Ottawa's result? Because right now they're 4-1, right? When you talk about the odds. So that's cool, I think. And the reason I bring that up is because they're probably going to be favored in tomorrow's game. I'd imagine on Thursday, maybe too. Like it just, I think going in knowing that is kind of a good indicator of where we should feel as a team, right? And I find the one I go by the score. They tend to be aligning with what I think. Like I knew they weren't the favorite in Carolina, but every game since then they've been the better team going in and have been in a better spot to win. So that's interesting to follow. I don't know if people find that interesting, but I'm a little bit of a nerd like that. I like to track those things. So I don't know. We didn't really break down Buffalo, but we can maybe even tomorrow if we got time, maybe a little pregame show. Afterwards, we'll talk about them. Obviously, we've got a couple days in between. Yeah, man, and it's a big week. Like you said, I didn't realize they were off until Thursday after the Saturday. So these next 3 games, it's every 2 days. We got Sens hockey to talk about and to watch. So Brennan, I think we can leave it there. That's right at the hour mark again. We got episode 50 in the books. That's 50 episodes for us. Very happy that everyone's joining. Again, if you like the YouTube page, comment on it as well. Let us know your thoughts just on, I mean, we talked about DeBrincat for a lot of it, but let us know what we, if we're out to lunch at all. I know people aren't shy to do that. And yeah, you got anything else just to wrap up number 50 here?
No, not really. I mean, just yeah, thanks everybody for the support again. It's been really good. We're enjoying these game shows. Obviously, like we started this in the off season, so these are our first kind of few games we've got. And yeah, just to add on what you said, Ottawa is kind of the favorite, and I think they're not an easy kind of peg on the calendar for a lot of teams now. It's someone who they're looking at, and teams are actually scared of. So that feels good. It feels refreshing. But now, like, hey, listen, Buffalo tomorrow. Like, if Ottawa loses, they're back to 3-3, which I hate. I hate being 500. Something about that just rubs me the wrong way. I really do not like it. So again, it's the whole thing. We said it before Detroit. They can either be 3-3 or they can be 4-2, and that's a pretty significant difference one way or the other. So big chance here to kind of rebound, and I want to see my keys for tomorrow just really quick. And we might do a pregame show. Yeah, we'll see kind of how it works out. But I want to see the top line get going. I want to see another dominant performance from Forsberg, because if Forsberg has a good game tomorrow, he might just be their starter for a while, because Korpisalo hasn't been bad, but like he hasn't won them games, and Forsberg has. So the top line, I want to see Forsberg, and then I'm gonna go. I don't know. I'm going to go with another good game from Sanderson, and that's just because he doesn't have his partner. So kind of an easy one there for the third. But
and up against Owen Power.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good matchup. Yeah, Sanderson versus Power. So they both obviously have their new contracts. So give me a quick few keys you've got for tomorrow, just off the top of your head, and then we'll wrap up.
If I could pick an ISO cam, I'm watching Tim Stützle all game. I need a superstar performance from him. I could care less about points at this point because he's got a ton of them already. I want, I'm looking at everything. I'm going to analyze everything. Body language, just the way he's skating, how he's staying on his feet, the way he's moving the puck. Like, there's a lot of stuff. We didn't talk about Chychrun and him going at it on the bench. It gave me Derek Brassard, Erik Karlsson vibes from a few years ago in the playoffs. But yeah, like that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Tim Stützle to be the best player on the ice, because he can and he should. So that's what we're looking for in Buffalo. Yeah, we'll talk about maybe a pregame show. We'll let you know if we do have one. But that's been episode 50, the Everyday Sens podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We will see you all next time, and go Sens go.